Okay, carrying on here with part two of the setup of the introduction to the enterprise programming assignment. We got up to the stage where we were just building a controller, and we'd had our data accessor object set up with the connection string to your particular account, with your make sure you get your account name, that's your surname and initial in both places, and then your password at the end to it. Everything else can stay the same. And we had our film.java again, the one that you were given. What we left you with last time was with the main controller creating an instance of that data accessor object, asking that data accessor object to get all the films, and then iterating over that array list of films to the film size, getting each one in turn, and then just printing it out as a string. We should now be in a position where we can try running this. So if I run the main controller as a standalone Java application, you'll notice there right at the bottom a great massive films coming out. All those 1,000 films, and actually it's too big for the buffer to sort of show. Now you may find that if with something like 2,000 films or something like that in there, that there's too many coming out, you can limit your results in your data accessor object when you do a select. If you want to limit the actual result that comes out, when you select star from film, you can just have limit and then how many you want to select at the most. So that way, if I now rerun that particular program, if I run that controller again, I only get the first 20 films from 10,001 through to 10,020. You'll notice that they're all the films beginning with A, say, to start it off. So if you want to limit it just temporarily, then yes, perhaps put that limiting instruction in there. But remember that you have got it in, because later on when you're wanting to get multiple results out, it can be a bit of a problem if you've forgotten that. So let's progress on and say, okay, well, we've got it printing out individual films there, and I know that works as a standalone. Let's try and also perhaps incorporate some JSON conversion in there. Now, in order to do that, I need to ensure that I've got the right libraries put in. Now, we did that in the other section. We need to add these libraries into our runtime library availability and add them into our project for it. I think we'd already added the, well, I wasn't sure, I can't remember, but I'm just going to add them again basically for it. I need to add the JSON and MySQL jar files to my project. So to add them to your project, just right click the project, paste them in. You'll see them appear at the bottom, and if you just select them and right click them, you'll see the bit about build path, add to build path. Now, one thing to do while we're here, and to remember for later, because it's a common thing that we forget, while you've got the jar files there just in your buffer, also add them to the webinf lib folder. So I'm just going to paste them in there, so I've got the two available. Now what this means is that I can start using the JSON object. So in my main controller, this is still just a standalone one, I can declare JSON, lowercase JSON, to be a new JSON object. It'll complain at first saying, well, can we not import that? So import that. Now that will come up if you've correctly added it to your project. The JSON library allows us to auto-convert our data. So I can now use that JSON object to create a string of all films JSON, to be JSON.toJSON of those films that are generated before. So that's saying take the films that you've just got from the array list, convert it to JSON. That will be one big long string, and well, then we've just got the string. We can do whatever we like with it. So in this case, I'm just going to temporarily just print it out. So print line all films JSON. All films JSON. And so that should then appear at the bottom of my screen when I run it. I'm going to clear my screen, make sure it's saved, and then just try running it again. So on the source, my controller, main controller, Java application. So you'll see there I've got my 20 films coming out, but right there at the bottom is my JSON array. It's an array because right at the start I've got a square bracket and then the individual components of each one: ID, title, year, director, stars, review, and it's one, and there's the second one, ID, or the fourth one I think. But it's a big long JSON string coming out. So the point of doing that is we know now that your film data accessor works, that I'm getting back films, and that I'm converting them into JSON. If you also want to test it to test the other, and it's a useful thing to be able to do, I can also maybe just get create a single film, F, to be my film data accessor object dot get film by ID, and get just an individual film, and let's pick out, say, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2. What's that? 10,013 for the ID. 10,013. That's getting a single film, so I can print that out. System out print line f dot to string. It's just one film. Go away. So printing out just the one there. And I can maybe do the same thing about converting it into JSON. So system out print line JSON to JSON of F. So they're taking that single film, converting it to JSON, and printing it out. Now I'm just going to comment out these previous prints for now, just so as I don't fill my entire screen up. Clear the screen, and then let's run that controller again. So I'm just going to get the one film. There I've got just a standard print out the to string, but then also the JSON part to it. So these little standalone controllers are quite useful just to test out your data accessor object for it. What I'm going to do now is to create a servlet that does exactly the same thing. It'll just send the results back to a browser. So in order to do that, let's go to the controller and create a new servlet. And the class name there, I'll just call controller. So this has created a servlet with the outside name of controller, and you'll see you get some skeleton code being created with your do get do post inside it. And it's a do get that I'm just going to amend. And the only thing I'm going to do is take the code that I had in here, the code that I had in my main, literally just copy and paste it in. So inside my controller, paste in that same bit of code. The bit here at the top about response get writer, that's a bit like a hello world. It just prints served at whatever the servlet name is at the top of your web page. I'm going to comment that out because I don't want to see that. Now the thing that I'm going to add is to create a print writer called out. Print writer called out, which will be response.getWriter. What this will allow me to do is to use the print writer and import it. I can use a print writer now to send results direct back to the screen. So instead of doing system out print line, if I now just do out.println, the results that I'm going to get will go back to my browser there. You could have them go into both places if you want. You could have a system out print line and still have it appearing down in the bottom if you wanted to see the results in your console as well. So all I've changed there is I've added a print writer and then just use that print writer for my printing. And later on I can get all the data as well. So that's in place. And let's try running that controller, not as a standalone, but run as on the server. Tell it to use Tomcat all the time. I'll get my Tomcat starting up in the bottom screen in a second. And there in my browser window, I've got my to string version of the film and then the JSON version of it. So already we're moving on sort of quite well. We've got a servlet that can test out the data accessor object and work alongside that. Now one of the key parts of what the assignment is about is that we should use the MVC pattern here. Basically the MVC pattern says you've got a controller, it's a model view controller. This is a controller that we're in. Now it asks the data accessor object to get a list of films, but then rather than printing out the films direct from the controller, we should be passing them over to the to one of the viewers. Now this has been done in Ajax Data. If you have a look at the show cities, this does it in a similar way. We ask the data accessor object, cityutils, to find the cities and we get a list of cities, but then the printing isn't done in here. The printing says pass the control over to these little utility viewers, cities XML JSP, cities JSON JSP, cities string JSP. The data's passed over to there, and the data is passed as an attribute of the request block. So the cities that I created gets put as an attribute inside the request block. Now I'm going to do the same thing but with my films. So if you've got your show cities open, you might just want to pause and get that thing open. But I'm going to just take a copy from that request down to the dispatcher. take a copy of that, and inside my controller I'm going to paste that in. Now the bit about converting to JSON I'm going to remove from here because I'm not going to do any of the printing now, so I'm just going to remove these bits about printing it out. They were just little debugs to see whether it worked okay. Now here, request set attribute, I've got a list of films, and I'm going to pass that list of films over to one of my viewers. So we can do a quick bit of editing and say, okay, well the attribute name is going to be films, and I'm putting in it the films data object, and the ones that I'm passing it over to, I'll still keep them in the results area, but that will be films XML, films JSON, and films string. So that just means that I should have a folder called results with these 3 viewers underneath it, underneath my webinf. So I'll go into my webinf, create a folder called results, and I just want three files in here. So a new file, films JSON.jsp, new file, films XML .jsp, and the films string. .jsp. And these are going to be the viewers. So my controller is going to find the films, it's going to generate the films. Now again, I don't think I actually need this bit about iterating through and printing them out, because no printing is going to be done there. So my controller asks the data accessor object to get the films, puts those films in the request block, and then the dispatcher later on passes that request block off to whichever output page I want. What this MVC approach allows us to do then is to change how you invoke the methods, how you change it in the controller, and this will be when you use the RESTful solution later on. The data accessor object will allow you to change how you store the data without affecting the others, and the viewers let you have different ways of sending the data back to the user. Now these viewers, these are the thing, don't use the ones in the original one. There's a nice little demo of those in that that file that I recommended using before, getting from week 8, the demo of using the Google Data Store via JDO. Inside here, in the bit about formatting the results, you'll see a bit about conversion to JSON. Now this is your film, you're going to make this the film's JSON. So I'm just going to copy it out of here. So copy that bit, and that's my film's JSON to put in. Bit of tidying up needed. It's not the model isn't city, the model is film, and it's not in the demo co project, it's just under the model. This is a list of film called films. A list of film, and get the attribute films. So that attribute there, request.getAttributeFilms, that will have been put in there where you've got the set attribute, and then pass a request over. So that's the link between the two. I then use my JSON to be able to say, okay, well, let's turn that films into a JSON string, and then response get writer, print that JSON string out. The XML version, slightly more complex. Conversion to XML, we actually have to not only we have to do a bit of annotation and create a list data structure to hold a list of, in this case, cities or films that we're going to have. But I'm just going to pick over, first of all, grab a copy of from the cities XML JSP. That's going to be my films XML. So films XML JSP. Paste this one in, and again a bit of tidying up needed here. Set the model to be film, and it's not in the package com demo code, it's just in the package model. And I'm going to create this film list in a second, so let's just call it film list to work with, and then do the other bits of the conversion. Film list films is a new film list. Of film, and that comes out of looking for the attribute called films. Then we can, again, let's a new instance of a film list. The marshaller in place. Marshal the films. And we then got a catch. So the only thing that seems to be having a bit of trouble now is the fact that it doesn't know what a film list is. So let's create a film list. But now to see what a film list will look like, it's rather like this sort of idea for a city list here. So in fact I'm just going to use that, and I'm going to create within my model a film list object, film list. And again, let's just get the syntax right. So that's going to be film list. This is the XML annotation used when it generates the XML elements inside. So there'll be an XML, there'll be a root element of film list, and then each individual one will have the element name film. That's a film list. This is really just a copy and paste type thing that I'm working through here. So I'm making all the reference to films and cities reversed out. Can't remember what I did there. Films. Need to do a quick bit of importing. XML element. List comes from Java util, and the XML access type, it's just the same as one of those. Let's see, XML access type. Now another thing that I'll need later on is actually this needs a blank constructor in here as well for the annotation to work correctly. It's easy enough to put one in yourself, just public film list. Blank constructor, nothing inside it. Get these brackets correct. Okay, so I've created my sort of film list there for it. So films, xml.jsp should now know about the film list. So as long as I've saved it, I can just do a quick project clean. And it now finds the film list. No errors in there. So what my controller's now going to do is pass the results over to Films XML or Films JSON. But it does need a parameter called format passing in. Because otherwise the result is Films string. It's looking for the parameter, and if it can't find one, the final one is sending the results over to Films string. Now currently Films string I've got doing nothing, so I won't get any result coming from that. So let's give this thing a try. Running the controller now. So that's passing the data over. Nothing seems to be appearing because that's doing by default a string. But if I just pass a parameter into this for the format, so I'm just going to, but I'm going to run this as well from a normal browser because the internal browser to Eclipse isn't that good. So inside my normal browser, I'm going to paste that address in, and question mark format equals JSON, and I'm getting my 20 results coming back in JSON format. And if I swap it over to XML, this is a common problem, and it's one that I was wanted to sort of come up because you will see this. XML declaration only allowed at top of document. And if I have a look at the actual page source, it does appear that the XML's there, not very well formatted, but there's 6 blank lines at the top. Now the reason for that is that inside my films xml.jsp, all of these page imports, funnily enough, there's 6 of them there. Now, each one of them is causing a blank line to be sent to the output, causing the start of the XML to be incorrectly reported. Now, what you need in there is the white space controller, white space ignoring command. I did send this round the group, so it'll be in the forum messages. So I can just quickly go to the Enterprise Programming Forum. Extra lines generated in output. Probably have to log in again. Here it is. Some of you may have noticed that using Gson and JAXB methods, blank lines at the beginning, you need this directive in. So I'm going to put that inside my JSP. I'll also, for good measure, I'll just put it inside my film's JSON as well. Then I don't get blank lines at the top of that one. Save everything. And then let's just rerun that controller. So again, because the default string there, nothing's coming up. But if I reload that XML one now, then yeah, there's the XML coming out, being displayed, or JSON. It's a matter of which browser you choose as to how well it looks. If I do this similar thing in Firefox rather than Chrome, so putting it in Chrome, sorry, in Firefox here, I still get my JSON coming out. One long line of it there. If I put in for the XML, one long line of XML coming out. Might be nice if we could get this thing formatted a bit better. I think that might be one of the prints that we can do. Marshalling films out, catching the things at the end. I don't know. There should be a print line in there somewhere to sort of work with. However, what we've got now so far, and it should be we've now come quite a distance, that we can invoke the data accessor object, get the films, and then pass them over to the appropriate viewer. You'll need probably to work on the film string one, perhaps sort of iterating over the films list one element at a time and doing some sort of print of each value to it. Interestingly, you will find bits of how to do that if you have a look in the project, for the JDO page. Get round back to it. The project in week 8. The actual Eclipse project for the JDO data store. There's some useful viewers in there that actually show you doing that for the strings. So you might want to move on and try that. But hopefully now you're at the stage where you've got a data accessor object being accessed by a controller and sending it on to the viewer, and you've got the structure in place. You can now build up on the data accessor object to add things like the insert film and getting an individual one and deleting them, those extra sort of operations. You might need to work on when you're sending the data across. This is putting the JSPs here are expecting a list of films, and even when you get a single film by ID, you may want to put it into an array list, then you can reuse that, or you can have a separate viewer just for a single item. Depends on whether or not you're getting a list of films or a single film, but these current viewers are for lists of films to work with. Okay, signing off there for that one. Good luck, and I hope you can proceed on with the project.